eyeballs, what did you see?
It couldn't have been me, sir. I was front row in my AOC t-shirt, foie gras sucking on a press release, sir. My head down, fourth shot, good little sheep, sir. Sit down, sweetie, the adults are gonna speak first. They trust the science and they're terrified of research. Here to thank our healthcare heroes, they've been feeding to the burnout, feet first. Until suddenly they dip mid-shift, take a header off a bridge. Such a shame, they were really such a sweet nurse. Now they'll never get the card and the cold slice of pizza meant to thank them for their teamwork. Now they'll never get the baggie full of checks mixed, which would be the one reward they'd see for the moms they had to intubate. And the countless cries of grief since we've been haunted by the specter of the C-word. Now all the applause for our healthcare heroes rings a very hollow note because we played it out like Freebird. See, add the ones and zeros in our fragile checks and balances are checks for all the wealthy who have such unholy talents that we think it's patriotic that we all got zero balances. And re-elect Pelosi so she'll face our toughest challenges. Which is analogous to water for a drowning man. Nancy disregards our impoverished with a spiteful and dismissive little waving of her withered hand. Cause 500,000 freezing on the streets is Biden's winter plan. And I bet you swore they told you you were voting for a different man. But really all you wanted was a different man. It didn't make a fucking difference if he finishes the previous inhabitant's agenda and starts auctioning protected land. Biden's born to leap at any war a donor's check demands. Turns out that you can't cure greed once it infects a man. Once they lose respect for human life and focus all their fucking efforts on the oil baron rescue plan. Honey, what are we to Hecuba or Hecuba to us that if she's starving we should give a damn? Why should we be moved to tears if someone isn't eating? We won't even recognize that food is essential to our being. It's just us and motherfucking Israel who will not guarantee that food's a basic human right. Because starvation is our favorite tool of genocide disguised as sanctioned democratic healing. That's me in the corner, losing my religion, gouging out my eyes and then dancing on the ceiling. Jesus fucking Christ, what a feeling.
Hey, what about you eyeballs? What did you see?
SWAT team took your neighbor today. Watched them as they walked him away. You told yourself extremists come in all different shapes. Met his eyes and lowered your gaze. Is it too late for us to ever change? When we are collecting the dust of better days, they're always watching us, but we're never safe. We're not meant to be safe, not meant to escape. We aren't meant to wake. Sheriff stopped your daughter today. Pepper sprayed twice in the face. He must have had good reason if he'd treat her that way. At least that's what they've taught you to say. But is it too late for us to ever change? Once we're collecting the dust of better days, they're always watching us, but we're never safe. We're not meant to feel safe, not meant to escape. We aren't meant to wake. Feds arrived and had you detained. Said you'd made some posts they want changed. Tased you till you felt like you'd forgotten your name, or life before they had you contained. Life before they had you contained. SWAT team took your neighbor today. Maybe that's how it goes. We won't open our eyes, so we're the last ones to know. We're the last ones alive, kept our enemies close, wondered why we don't thrive, while we're grasping at ghosts, counting backwards from 5. Counting backwards from 5. Counting backwards from 5.
Count back from 5. The theater on fire, the cast on strike. The studio stock starts taking a dive. The contracts tossed and they're gone with the tide. And the heads and execs, their hands are tied. We can't pump this dreck and treat you, right? But what do you expect from the industry type who survive by the leeching of bodies and minds? From those who original thoughts never seem to find. So they're gonna reboot ALF before your wages rise. And it gives cause to pause and reflect on the times. If they're losing control of their fools and their mimes, when all those obedient actors who grew their careers by averting their eyes are now holding the line, along with the authors of countless scripts that strengthen the hand of that corporate grip, squeezing our throats till we take the pen and we accept and consent to the corporate drip. Till you're all up to date on your pharma du jour, till you got a healthy support for the war on your lips. And now you know that the advertisers need more than a rerun summer full of flashback clips. Enter the scans from the year before, all the days of de-aging and mapping the face, and the hours of actors recording their voices are links in the chains that will bind them in place. Now all of those shows are so easy to make. When they got a drone they control that needs no break, it can bend, it can break, and it's cheaply replaced enough up-to-date films all in one take. And those studios bank on us doing our duty, unhinging our jaws and digesting the fakes. Because they know that we'll love how synthetic it tastes. Watch as they edit your features without any trace. Not that there's anything you could do anyway. Now watch as they show you a movie you saying shit you would never say. Dystopia boldly accelerates. Maybe you're only a mold, something to fill with a clone, something that Elon would celebrate. Something they own, something they program and code, something that's woefully able to know it's exanimate. Cause it doesn't feel touch over top of the laminate. You will not feel an emotion, but they will not scan and examine it. You and the other consumer contaminants fed on the federal diet of Kiev, Havana, and Tiananmen. I can't be the only one weighing the pros of abandonment.
are these people?
Who are these people? Hi, everybody. It's Indy. It's Tuesday night. The world is crazy like it usually is. So we're here for Indie News Now. So we'll try to break down some of this craziness and try to make sense of what the hell's going on, who's pushing what narratives, why they're pushing it, what the hell's actually happening, and try to figure our way through some of this stuff. Yeah, Fred Edward, I did not bring hot wings. I think that question is for the handsome cynic, Angel Rivera. Angel, I think it was your turn to bring the wings this week, so hopefully you did. Kiana Folk, good to see you over on Substack. The Scent in Bloom is here. We're going to hopefully read one of her articles later, depending on how much time we have. I have a pretty packed lineup tonight. So, yeah, we're going to talk about quite a few things. First thing is I want to talk, a lot of people don't know because they haven't been around, but if you have, you'll know that Julian Assange and the fight for free speech and to free Julian Assange was something very near and dear to my heart and something that we covered extensively here on INN for years. And thankfully he's out and in Australia now, kind of quiet, but there has been some motion from the community around him, and I'm going to bring some stuff from that I think a lot of people kind of missed a little bit. And that's, hey, how did we miss that? That's what this show used to be. But we're going to talk about an article written by The Dissident, who is an original co-founder of INN, still publishes a bunch over at his Substack, the307.substack.com. And he watched a congressional testimony this week that was really interesting, that the CEO of the NED was testifying and maybe let out a little too much truth to the point where they had to shut down his hearing immediately from the moment he said it. And then we're going to go back and we're going to look at who this guy is and kind of a little bit of predictive what was going to happen. We're going to look at an article from like 5 years ago about him, which is why we shouldn't really be surprised by him and what's going on there. I want to talk about what's happening with Anthropic, and I'm not even up on the latest, but I'm going to bring you up to speed on what I believe is the latest in what's happening in their struggle or their fight or not fight with the military. I'm sure, a lot of you have seen the news about this, that Claude Code is a big AI coding program and an AI agent program that the government was using quite a bit. And there was a battle, and we're going to talk about exactly why there was the battle over whether they're going to be used or not going forward. And they did not want to agree to the government's terms, and now they're being ripped out of the government. So that's interesting to see. And I brought a couple of different takes on that. And then, of course, I want to talk about at least the early precursor and what was going on with Iran. How we got here and the early part of this, unprovoked attack is what it is. That's what I said in the title. Another unprovoked attack. We seem to be getting good at that. Not that we weren't already good at that, but we seem to be doing it more and more often, which is kind of frightening and also upsetting, considering that our policy our whole lives was not to do that. And that's what we were, that's how we quote unquote had the moral high ground for a long time, or whatever you want to call that nonsense. And then if we have time, I want to read this Zorro Ranch article. I talked about it last week. We read the article about Great St. James, which is the other Epstein Island, which was way larger than Little St. James. Now both are being sold and in the process of being converted into some kind of a resort hotel. Oh God, can you imagine? But yeah, that's our plan for tonight. So it's really interesting. Of course, the Iran stuff is Israel-led, and so we're going to do a little fuck Israel there, but we're not going to talk about Gaza tonight. And we're not really going to talk about ICE much tonight, which is a refreshing, somewhat change. Not that they're not still doing all kinds of crazy shit. It's just I need a break from talking about it for 1 week. Like, we'll get back to it next week, but there's some other things out there that I thought needed to be talked about that really probably hadn't been enough. So before we get started, please support independent media if you can. The ways to do that, the best ways to do that are using Cash App, $ Indie News Network, or if you do ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, it'll actually pop your message up on screen and put your name up there. You can do paypal.me/Indie News Network. Without friends and family, we get 100% of the fees then, 100% of the money, no fees. Patreon.com/Indie News Network is a monthly subscription that you can do. There's a couple different levels. $3 a month and $5 a month, something like that. And there's like 20, I think. And we've got our website, IndieNewsNow.com. You know, that's the name of the show, Indie News Now Live, because there's an actual website called IndieNewsNow.com. It's a news aggregator, and I'm bringing a lot of the articles that you would find on IndieNewsNow.com. There's also a way to watch the show live on IndieNewsNow.com if we get shut down by all the platforms. There's a merch store. You can pick up merch. You can pick up a T-shirt of me in a little green tie. And then we also have the podcasts that are affiliated with our network, and also a way to tip the network directly using our Stripe link. And then, like I said, we're live on Substack at IndieMediaToday.com. That's one of the newsletters I publish to. The other one is INNNewsletter.com. So please subscribe to either one of those for free, or subscribe monthly with a paid subscription, or annually if you're able to and want to support over there. Thank you for any way that you do that. Again, all the people on that board right there already have. I love you all. Thank you. We need it. We're running a little behind, our goal for this year, honestly. I was hoping by the end of March to be at 25% of our goal, since that's 25% of the year through. Right now we're at 11. So anything anybody can do, if you have a couple of bucks. I know times are tight. I know that the cost of everything is up, and now oil prices are looking like they're going to go up, gas prices and everything. If you can shake out some change between the couch cushions, we appreciate it. Okay. So I'm going to first get to kind of the lighter side of what I wanted to talk about tonight. Lighter side being Julian Assange being freed. And what's happening now with the movement and with the people that kind of had organized together to raise that awareness and to petition the governments and get everybody excited and energized about seeing him freed. And now he is. But also, there is this Substack that was started by some people in Europe. They wanted to create an archive that permanently documents everything that happened, because we don't want to see this memory hold, number one, and we want to see parts of it rehashed, celebrated, and kind of showcased and studied as a way to organize people in one way. And I wanted to bring an article. So this is their Substack. It's called AssangeArchives.substack.com. All right. And I'm going to read this article over here as well as the one beneath it, because this one talks about what the mission and goal of this Assange archive is. So they're going to talk about inside the Julian Assange archive, how history arrives in a cardboard box, how vigils, banners, and ordinary acts of courage are carefully preserved and prepared for this summer's exhibition. Yes, there's going to be some kind of an exhibition where they display all this material. All right. At the Julian Assange archive, history does not arrive with headlines. It arrives in cardboard boxes with tape across the edges, a handwritten address, corners softened by travel. For a moment, the parcel sits on our table before we open it. Inside, there might be a folded T-shirt, still carrying the memory of rain from a vigil, a washed-out print showing years of dedication. A banner creased from being held hours in a public square. a book with notes in the margins, a script, a sticker designed late at night at someone's kitchen table, a letter written carefully and deliberately because the writer believed that words still mattered. When we open these boxes, we're not opening packages. We are opening acts of devotion to Julian, to truth, to freedom. Carmen and I were part of the vigils for Julian for years. We stood in the cold. We stood when the crowd was small. We stood when cameras were absent. We know what it means to hold a banner for hours and wonder if anyone notices. So when material arrives here, we don't see items. We see commitment. We see stubborn hope. We see people who refused to be silent. And I know there are people watching in this audience live right now that are in that group. All right. And that's why I'm bringing this, because this is about all of you guys also. It's about us. Every piece that reaches the Julian Assange archive is unpacked carefully. Not only because it might be fragile, but because it carries so much dedication from the people who send it to us and trust us taking care of them now. We photograph each object properly and systematically. We register it in our digital archive. It receives its own catalog number, its own identity within this growing body of memory. We record where it came from, which city, which group, sometimes even which vigil. And then it's placed on our shelves. Each city has its own section. Each action group has its place. Everything is recorded in our database so that nothing disappears into anonymity. When we need something for research, for documentation, for exhibition, we can find it immediately. But this isn't really about administration. This is about respect. To archive something properly is to say you were not invisible. Your effort mattered. Your presence is part of history. The shelving in our storage space is filling steadily. Each new arrival brings hours of careful work, documenting, cross-checking, registering, and placing. Carmen oversees this process with extraordinary dedication. Every entry must align. Every photograph must match the database. The physical object and the digital record must correspond perfectly. It's detailed, concentrated work. And we love it. Because every t-shirt, every handmade banner, every carefully printed flyer carries more than ink and fabric. It carries someone's time, someone's courage, someone's belief that standing up was necessary. From a simple handwritten placard to a trunk completely covered with free Julian Assange, this archive holds accumulated care. And care deserves care in return. All this work is part of something real, very real and very immediate. This summer, this year, we will open our first major exhibition in Dessau in Germany. I wish it wasn't in Germany, but that's where they live and where they've decided to do that. When visitors walk through the space, they'll see objects thoughtfully selected and contextualized. They'll see creativity, protest, and solidarity. They will see that this movement was built by ordinary people who chose to act. They will see personnel items from Julian during his time in the embassy and Belmarsh prison. Julian and his team entrusted those to us. What they will not see are the hours spent here beforehand, in storage, at the shelves, at the desk, entering catalog numbers, aligning records, preserving materials. The exhibition begins here. It begins with careful hands, with systems that ensure nothing is lost, and with the conviction that this history must be visible. Why are we sharing this? Well, with this post, we're opening a new section on our Substack, Behind the Scenes. From now on, we will take you with us as this work unfolds. The arrivals, the discoveries, the preparation, the scale of what is growing inside the Julian Assange archive. Because this archive doesn't belong to us alone, it belongs to everyone who stood in the street, everyone who created something, everyone who believed Julian needs our support and still believes it. Preserving this material requires space, archival supplies, shelving, digital infrastructure, time, a great deal of time. The Julian Assange Archive is a registered, charitable, tax-exempt, nonprofit organization. Donations are tax deductible within the EU according to national regulations. But beyond that, if you've ever stood at a vigil and wondered whether it mattered, if you ever created something and hoped it wouldn't disappear, if you believe that ordinary people shape history, then this archive is yours too. Your support helps us preserve these acts of courage properly. It helps us prepare this summer's exhibition. It helps ensure that what people carried in the streets will not fade into obscurity. If you'd like to stand with us in this work, you can support us at the archive, and there's a donation link there at julianassangearchive.org/donation. Again, when history arrives in a box, we open it with care. With your help, we make sure it remains part of the future. Warm regards, Manja. Wow. And that's special. Again, a lot of us made things for vigils, for rallies, for protests. We stood and carried those banners. So the fact that somebody's willing to do this means a lot to me, honestly. I think it's really cool, and I support it. I certainly also have a lot of digital material myself that we created for INN for Julian. At some point, maybe I'll start to archive and go through it myself and send them a big box or a file folder digitally that can be downloaded and incorporated into this archive. So I think that would be really cool to be part of that. And I reached out to these people because beyond that, about 2 weeks before, they made this announcement. Exposing crimes is not a crime. The WikiLeaks Legacy Symposium. And this is happening in 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks in Germany. So they write that it's going to be a gathering for transparency in 2026. Ahead of this expo, dear followers of the Julian Assange Archive, in a world where whistleblowing remains under siege and the line between journalism and criminality is increasingly blurred. I'm not going to do the whole thing like that. The Disruption Lab Network, I never heard of them, but this is really cool, is convening a powerful 3-day symposium in Berlin. And it's called Exposing Crimes is Not a Crime, Real-World Consequences of WikiLeaks. This is curated by Tatiana Pazzicelli, all right, founder and artistic director of the Disruption Network Lab. This is the 37th event in their series, and it brings together 30 speakers, whistleblowers, journalists, lawyers, activists, artists, technologists, all to reflect on WikiLeaks' profound impact. 20 years after its founding, WikiLeaks transformed how public information is accessed and challenged. They challenged systems of power through leaks on war, surveillance, diplomacy, corporate misconduct, and more. This symposium examines why these revelations mattered, how they shifted global politics and society, and what paths forward exist for resistance and accountability. This whole program unfolds over 3 days of panels, which will be March 19th, 20th, and 21st at HAU 1, whatever that is, and they'll talk about that in a minute. All right, followed by an activation day, whatever that means, focused on future tactics and actions, which I like that this is, not just a look back, but what now? So these themes are going to span war in the military-industrial complex, government and diplomatic cables, intelligence and cyber surveillance, the global economy and corporate secrets. The Epstein stuff is relevant right now there. And then, of course, art and culture as evidence and resistance, because there was a ton of art made in pursuit and, in tribute to Julian Assange. Documentaries that were created and compilations that were assembled. I can think of Joe's video that he made ahead of the October 8th, 2022 protest in front of Merrick Garland's office. That was, I believe, one of the largest gathering of Assange activists, like in the United States, in the United States throughout his entire time. I mean, there were like 35 speakers that day. Misty organized a lot of that. And it wasn't just Misty, but she was the lead organizer. The speakers include a remarkable cross-section of voices who lived or studied these issues firsthand. Highlights from the lineup, of course, you've got Stella Assange is going to be there. What's funny is that I don't believe that Julian himself will be, but Stella will be. You've got whistleblowers like Lisa Ling and John Kiriakou, who's been everywhere lately, and Terry Albury, a former FBI agent, and Thomas Drake, a former senior NSA executive. They're all offering direct insights into the systems that WikiLeaks exposed. You're also going to have the WikiLeaks editor-in-chief, Kirsten Hernafson, there. Our friend Stefania Marizzi. All right, Ewan McCaskill, John Getz, Matthew Kennard, Indie Media Award honoree Matthew Kennard, and Mark Curtis. Also, Stefania's an Indie Media Award honoree, of course. All right, they're going to discuss the leak's journalistic legacy and ongoing implications of their work. How many times a week do we still say thank you, Julian, for stuff that he uncovered that were in the WikiLeaks cables? All right, you've got advocates and experts like Chip Gibbons. He's also, by the way, not just a researcher, but a journalist in his own right. All right, and Suna Avers Dodir, all right, from Courage International, and Renata Avila Pinto, and Sulet Dreyfus, all these people, amazing. Also, you've got David Dormino. He's the sculptor that made the Anything to Say sculpture where you could stand on a chair. I think it was next to Assange and maybe Snowden, another truth teller. It was like so that you could stand there next to them and tell the truth. Okay, and then the closing panel, Art as Evidence in the Resistance, moderated by Becky Hagpadah Shirwan, of the director of Apolitical. That's another YouTube channel and news outlet that Matt Kennard has done stuff with. All right. Now, this is written by Manja McKay, the artist and co-founder of the archive. She'll be joining the art panel. So it concludes and says that this symposium arrives at a pivotal moment in 2026. As threats to independent journalism, whistleblowers, and transparency persist worldwide, events like this serve as vital spaces for reflection and strategy. WikiLeaks revelations were never just data. They ignited debates on power, ethics, and accountability that continue today. The Activation Day on March 22nd will channel these discussions into concrete tactics for the future. Now, this is cool because I actually emailed them about covering this. The event is free to live stream with German simultaneous translation for the main panels, which is even cooler because it's obviously going to be in English. In-person tickets are available for £15 or €15, with 3-day pass reduced to €21. I mean, if you're there, please go over to Berlin and go attend this, please, and film it and shake hands and hug people for us, please. I would love to attend this. Join the Disruption Network Lab Telegram for the newsletter for updates. So again, for the Julian Assange Archive, this symposium represents continuity. From the leaks that exposed truths to the grassroots solidarity that sustained the fight, now preserved and activated for new generations. We look forward to sharing more from Berlin and welcoming visitors to our permanent space in Dessau later in 2026. That's where they're going to have that exhibit over the summer. All right, and then they have a link here to get details and tickets. Also, if you have materials from the WikiLeaks era or the broader transparency movement, art, banners, or stories, consider contributing them to the archive for preservation and future exhibitions. Your support helps ensure these stories endure, whether through donations to sustain our work by sharing this post to spread the word, or talking about it on your show, or tell other people about it. Every contribution, big or small, makes a difference in keeping the memory alive. Again, they also have a full website on their own, not just on Substack, JulianAssangeArchive.org, or you can send them an email to info@JulianAssangeArchive.org. And again, I was in touch with these people already, and I think that that's why they added the thing about live streaming, because I asked them, like, hey, could we like co-stream this to our channels maybe if you guys are not planning on streaming this, if you're what the story is. So no, they said that it's going to be free to stream. Basically, just please share the stuff. And they also said that they would try to make some of the people available to us for interviews if we wanted. And I would get back to them on that. So again, Julian Assange Archive, pretty damn cool. Very cool that these people have taken this on voluntarily, put together a nonprofit to archive all this stuff. Right. That is funny that Bibi is right now in Berlin. I'm guessing that by the time they hold this symposium in 2 weeks, he won't still be there. But that's just my guess. Karen Peterson, welcome to the stream. How are you? Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Good to hang out over on the Rumbles. All right. Yeah, so now the line is pardon Julian Assange, because while he was freed under the condition that he had to admit to publishing classified material, which technically is journalism. But he had to plead guilty to something. So right now the push by the people who support him is that we are pushing for a presidential pardon, even though he did nothing wrong. It then absolves him and puts on the record that he really did nothing wrong in the journalism that he did, and that he was persecuted for close to a decade. I don't know if we'll ever get that, honestly. I think Jesse Jett wrote a piece called "The Win." Is that all we get before we go? And yes, I know that. Yes, that is true. Truth freeze. Pompeo and Trump wanted Assange killed. I don't think that Trump did. I know that Pompeo certainly did. Trump loved WikiLeaks. How much did he fucking love WikiLeaks during the 2016 election? Then Vault 7 happened in 2018, and Mike Pompeo decided to treat WikiLeaks as a hostile non-state actor and designate them as terrorists, which allowed them to do all kinds of things like plot their assassination. That's why that happened specifically. So, pardon Julian Assange. I would, again, love to attend this. If you are in Europe and watching or listening to this, and you know somebody that can attend, I wish that they would, and document some of this for us, or, send us some stuff, tag us live on social media. I will be trying to cover this live as much as I can in real time while it's happening. It's happening over a weekend. It's like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and it is from 10 a.m. Eastern time until 5 in the afternoon. So it's like basically all day long during the workday, and I'm going to do my best to kind of check in on it and maybe take some screen caps or do some recaps or something. And again, I'm just excited that somebody's starting to do something with all this material that people have collected. I know Misty has got banners and stickers and buttons. She had boxes full of buttons, and I know she got rid of a lot of that stuff already. It was taking up a lot of space in her attic or in her garage, and after a while, it's time. I mean, it's been a couple of years already since he's out now. June 24th or June 24th, I believe, will be 2 years. So, yeah, support independent media. because we need it more than ever. I don't know where else you're hearing about the Julian Assange archive on anybody else's show, but I love talking about things that nobody else is. But we need your support because we are user funded here. Ways to do that are on that board. Cash App, $ Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. Over at paypal.me/Indie News Network. At patreon.com/Indie News Network. Hey, I'm sensing a theme. Now, the network's newsletter is INNnewsletter.com. We publish several podcasts over there, the occasional article, but every Friday I put out a network weekly update with a recap and a summary and links to everything that was put out by the network for the entire week prior. Indie Media Today is my Substack where I publish this show and all of its clips individually as their own posts, appearances on other shows, and I write my own original articles over at IndieMediaToday.com. So there's a reason to subscribe over there. And again, the show is called Indie News Now Live because there's a website called IndieNewsNow.com. That is not just for our stuff. That's a news aggregator with over 100 different outlets, journalists, and publishers. And it's a 24/7 live stream, live mix, and it is completely ad-free and built by me and uses the RSS feeds from all these different outlets to create an independent stream of news and opinion and perspective that you really don't see anywhere else. And that's why we built it. So, back to me. Okay. We're going to get to this crazy op. Now, we all know the NED sucks, and we've been talking about the NED for a long time. The NED is the National Endowment for Democracy. Now on their board, I believe, is Victoria Nuland. They may have even been disbanded, but I don't think they completely were, because we know that they are kind of like an extension. We know USAID was disbanded, but the NED is kind of this little secret agency very closely connected with CIA. And our friend the dissident over at the 307.substack.com published an article last week. The head of a CIA cutout, that's the NED, admits to meddling in Iran to fuel unrest. Well, that's pretty interesting. So what are we talking about? So I'm going to bring this article, and this happened actually in 2022. And I don't know if you remember, but there was like an attempted color revolution back in 2022 in Iran. And there was a lot of stuff about a women's uprising. So we're going to read this article. At a recent House Appropriations Committee hearing, Damon Wilson, remember that name, he's the current president of the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy. They're a notorious cutout of the CIA's regime change arm, which has previously helped fund coups around the world, admitted to meddling in Iran, and helping to fuel both the women's life freedom protests in 2022, as well as the recent protests in Iran. So this is an ongoing project. Wilson boasted that the U.S. government-funded organization helped spread the story of a woman being killed for not wearing a headscarf in Iran that sparked the women's life freedom protests in 2022, even admitting that the story wouldn't have spread across Iran without the NED. Okay, that's a little weird. Wilson admitted in response to the question, "Are you doing anything in Iran? And can you tell us what that is?" He says, quote, "This has been a huge priority for the endowment. Iran has been, since I arrived at the endowment, our fastest growing program." Interesting. "It's now one of our largest programs globally that involves both direct partners, Iranian groups, as well as our core institutes. If you think about the impact of our work in Iran, the reason the women life freedom movement began with the simple act of a young woman who didn't fully cover her head with a headscarf, that story could have been lost in a regional story in Iran. But NED partners helped cover that story, get it out to the world, and get it back into Iran. He also admitted in reference to the most recent protests in Iran that the organization has helped smuggle Starlink terminals into Iran and spread propaganda that helped spark the pro-regime change protests. So we were just wondering, remember I did a story about how 7,000 Starlink terminals had made it into Iran? How the hell could they have made their way in without Iran knowing? There were some kind of groups that were NED affiliated apparently too. And this guy, the CEO of the NED, admits to it at a congressional hearing. He bragged, quote, "The endowment has been making investments over the years that have ensured that there have been secure communications, including Starlink's other means, file casting that allowed information to go both in and out of the country at a time when the regime tried to hide its brutal crackdown." Adding, quote, "Part of what we see manifesting is a response that our partners have helped tell the Iranian people the story that the regime has squandered their own resources on supporting proxies throughout the Middle East to the point where they can't manage their own water supplies for Tehran." Again, this is all bullshit. And these stories haven't just emerged. They're ones that have been covered, documented, and shared with the Iranian people consistently through our work. Completely propagandized, made up, and manufactured consistently through their work. He added, quote, "We've been investing in communication tools over the years that allow for information to be sent into Iran even when internet connectivity is blocked. We specifically began supporting the deployment, the operation of about 200 Starlinks early on. And right after he said that, they cut him off and they shut his mic off. And they cut off his whole thing. Crazy. Yes, Victoria Newland, I smell sulfur. That is absolutely correct. Devil incarnate right there. The reason why we have the escalation in Ukraine. And as anti-Russia as we've been for as long as the country's been, she's been one of the key drivers behind that, as well as her husband, Robert Kagan. Previously, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has boasted that the U.S. sanctions helped spark the protests in Iran, saying that, quote, "What we can do at Treasury and what we have done is created that dollar shortage in a country." At a speech at the Economic Club in New York in March, I outlined the strategy. It came to a swift and I would say grand culmination in December when one of the largest banks in Iran went under. There was a run on the bank. The central bank had to print money. The Iranian currency went into free fall. Inflation exploded, and hence we've seen Iranian people out in the street. So yes, it was an economic war through sanctions that we orchestrated, through crashing their economy, through crashing their currency, and through causing one of their banks to collapse and to fail. So they admit to do that, but while Bessent boasts that U.S. sanctions led to Iranian people out in the street, Wilson is boasting that NED has flooded Iran with anti-government messaging while people are suffering worsening conditions from the U.S. sanctions in order to further destabilize Iran and further the ultimate goal of regime change. It's sick. Like, they figure out a way to blame the leadership who aren't getting on board with what the U.S. wants, so they're starving out the country, then figuring out ways to blame the leadership for not getting on board and being to blame for that starvation, not the people that are implementing the sanctions. It's insane. But we should have known this years ago, because Brian Berletic from New Atlas had actually written this article back in 2021 when this guy, Damon Wilson, was first named as the head of the NED from the Atlantic Council. This guy's totally a spy, by the way, if you haven't figured that out. The head of the NED has to basically be a spy. And the fact that he came as the head of the Atlantic Council to the head of the NED that he held for 10 years. Yeah, this guy definitely has spook written all over him. Yep, that's right, Vicky. Atlantic Council. All right, NED, never enough death. That's right, Ghost Art. All right, again, this was back from the NED's own announcement. All right, but Wilson's previous employment, unlike Gershman, who at least on paper came from a humanitarian background, reveals an unapologetic, pro-war, pro-American hegemony administrator and policymaker. Let me make this a little bigger so you guys can read it. All right. These suspicions are immediately grounded in Wilson's own activity over the past decade at Atlantic Council, an arms industry, oil company, and bank-funded think tank promoting U.S. socioeconomic, political, and military domination over the planet and all the wars, interventions, and meddling used to achieve it. Understanding Wilson's career of promoting American belligerence abroad will help one to better understand which direction the U.S. NED will take in its continued role in funding U.S.-backed opposition groups and the regime change operations they're tasked with carrying out by Washington and around the globe. Remember, again, I will recap. This was written 5 years ago, and the NED is now bragging. This guy just went in front of Congress and bragged that basically, since he got there in 2022, he's made Iran a priority, and they've ramped up and grown their Iran program and their infiltration program for 5 years. They've been working on that. All right, and we've talked about the NED's inception because we read an extensive Alan McLeod article about the creation of the NED. All right, it was originally to rehabilitate the image of what was at time CIA-sponsored regime change operations. Right, the great democratic revolution that swept over the globe the past few years has been a triumph of overt action. The CIA old boys spent a generation fantasizing about this sort of global anti-communist putsch, but when it finally happened, it was in the open. There were no secret paramilitary armies. There was almost no bloodshed. The key operatives in the conspiracy turned out to be telephones, televisions, and fax machines. Working in broad daylight, the U.S. and its allies were able to do things that would have been unthinkably dangerous had they been done in the shadows. So, regarding the NED, the Washington Post noted that the sugar daddy of overt operations has been the NED. A quasi-private group at the time was headed by Carl Gershman that's funded by Congress. Through the late 1980s, it did openly what had once been unspeakably covert, dispensing money to anti-communist or anti-U.S. or anti-U.S. interest forces behind the, at the time it was anti-communist behind the Iron Curtain. And then they expanded out. So it became anti-Israel allies effectively. In other words, NED was a rebranding effort meant to dress up dirty and destructive U.S. regime change campaigns as promoting freedom around the world, just as the NED's official slogan says on its website. It always was, from 1983 when it was announced until today, a velvet glove placed over the iron fist of covert U.S. interventionism. All right. So this guy, again, was the head of the Atlantic Council. Here's the talk titled From Front Lines of Freedom in 2018. He admitted that the strategy of consolidating control over Eastern Europe is not meant to create new dividing lines in Europe. The aim is to anchor a vulnerable, insecure zone in the certainty of a stable and prosperous free Europe over the long time. This vision includes a democratic Russia. But the pathway to reform in Moscow might just begin with choices that are made in Kiev, in Chisinau, in Yerevan, and Tbilisi. These are in the former Soviet republics that are now their own individual countries, which NED had basically on, or the Atlantic Council had their sights on aligning with NATO in order to potentially antagonize Russia or, kind of backdoor their way into getting to Russia and then balkanizing Russia to turn that into a bunch of small democracies too, quote unquote democracies that are actually just puppet states here. Wilson reveals the goal of U.S. policymakers and their involvement in both the EU and NATO is not only to move both organizations up to Russia's borders, but to absorb Russia itself. A policy that couldn't be more obvious to geopolitical observers and the clear driving force behind Russian Western tensions today. This was 2021. This was before the Ukraine invasion. This was all set up. You could see this writing on the wall. Then what they did was they fearmongered and said that Russia wants to absorb all of Europe. When it's just the opposite. Throughout his time at the Atlantic Council, Wilson has helped promote the State Department narratives regarding not only the EU and NATO's antagonism toward Russia, but the West's wars abroad in general, including those in North Africa and the Middle East. All right. In 2016, at the U.S. Embassy in Berlin, he would advocate continued sanctions on Syria, of course, as well as continued support for armed militants that the U.S. is sponsoring to fight Syria's government by proxy. Those would be the white helmets. The ones that ended up dropping white phosphorus on a crowd and then blaming Assad for it for years, where Clarissa Ward from CNN went in there and she smelled chlorine, so of course she was convinced that it had to have been a chemical attack. Clownish. Wilson also particularly participated directly in propaganda projects with other notorious appendages of the Atlantic Council. This includes a co-authored paper he co-wrote with U.S. government-funded Bellingrap founder Elliot Higgins. Remember that douchebag? That whole outlet got exposed and the cover ripped off. All right, that was titled "Hiding in Plain Sight: Putin's War in Ukraine." Hilarious. Together with Wilson as president of the NED, sitting on the NED's board of directors are people like convicted criminal Elliot Abrams, who oversaw death squads in Central and South America. Scott Carpenter, who directly participated in the U.S. occupation of Iraq as director of governance for the Coalition Provisional Authority. And of course, the devil incarnate herself, Victoria Nuland. All right, Tory, whose conversations regarding the U.S. handpicking of Ukraine's new government in the wake of the U.S.-sponsored 2014 coup was leaked to the media. He famously says, Yats is the guy. The NED's role in promoting U.S.-backed regime change under the paper-thin veneer of promoting freedom around the world will likely transform into a much more direct tool of aggression wielded by the U.S. alongside sanctions and the ever-looming threat of military aggression. What a prediction. From 2021, we now see this coming true. Again, and Mossad and McCain helped. Yes, absolutely truth-free. Yep. While the U.S. may believe that Wilson's appointment as president and CEO of the NED signals strength, in reality, it's a sign of America's growing weakness in combination with an increasingly aware global public. A global public that understands what the NED is, what it does, and the danger that it actually poses, no matter what it claims to represent to be doing worldwide. So again, to recap, Wilson's appointment as president and CEO of the NED from 2021 may help governments around the globe better explain to their respective populations the danger that the NED poses and the necessity of legislation to either inhibit or entirely outright ban the organization and those taking money from them within their borders. Imagine if Iran had done such a thing. Yeah, not sure if Soros helped this color revolution, but oligarch Kolominsky did. Bet Epstein is tied to all that. That is likely correct. Definitely the color revolution in Ukraine when it was orange. That was a whole thing for sure. As far as the one in Iran, I'm not sure if Soros would be tied to that one either. Yeah, DC truly is truth-free and fuck Israel is correct. All right. And again, all of this still becomes narrative because of the West. All right. Gershman, who ran NED for 40 years, oversaw it attempting and ultimately failing to put that velvet glove over CIA-sponsored regime change by funding these non-governmental organizations, these NGOs, these charitable organizations, 501c3s and C4s here in the United States that then raised money and sent it overseas, just as a front for CIA stuff. Wilson will now be overseeing an NED, unable to hide behind such facades any longer. They don't need to. His own pro-war, pro-intervention, and pro-special interest background undermines the organization's self-proclaimed but obviously misleading mission statement even further. Yes, they ripped the mask off. They weren't even bothering to put on the pretext and the front that this wasn't real. I mean, look at that dude. That guy screams spook to you. He screams spy to me. That is what a spy looks like, by the way, if you didn't know. So fuck the NED, and yeah, they're regime change meddling, and they're funded directly, again, by our government in order to screw with other countries' leadership and to destabilize their country. But if it happened here, could you only imagine what would happen? All right. Support independent media, because we need it more than ever. The ways to do that, again, are on that board. Cash App, Ko-fi, PayPal, Patreon. At our website, there's a Stripe link where you can tip directly or subscribe monthly or annually over at Substack at IndieMediaToday.com, where we're live now. Hi to everybody watching over there, as well as over at IndieNewsNow.com, where you'll see a bunch of other different podcasts from Indie News Network. Okay. Yeah, truth free. I appreciate you hanging out. 2012 NDAA propaganda ban reversal, right? Makes our GT quite bold now. Yep, masks are off. That's right. Yeah. Ghost Start did have a good one. That Atlantic Council, NED, never enough death, was right. Cuba is now under sanctions. That is correct, and I was going to talk about that later. You know, U.S. sanctioned again, acts of war. Same with Japan and Pearl Harbor, Iraq, millions dead. Right. I mean, all these sanctions, and sanctions are murder. They sanctioned Haiti. We sanctioned Venezuela. Right. We've got Epstein and Khashoggi tied to Iran arms, Contra and Ali North. I mean, yeah, no, it's all connected. It's all connected. Going back years, for sure. I talked a couple of weeks ago about AI, and I talked about Claude Bot on the tech show. One of the biggest AI programs out there is Claude, not Claude Bot, but CLAUDE, Claude Code from Anthropic is this company that has shot up out of basically nowhere. And they are currently in a battle with the federal government over the use of Claude Code in military, but not just in the military, but now everywhere. All right. So I brought a few different articles to kind of explain what's happening and where we are right now, different perspectives and personalities that you might not have heard from or heard of before that I tremendously value. One of them is Carrie Wedler over at Pleasure to Burn. All right. And she says a battle is waging between the war machine and one of its profiteers. Anthropic AI is now biting the hand that feeds them, and they may pay the price. So she wrote this just less than a week ago. She says a battle is unfolding, and more has happened even since this, by the way. But I want to read this because this is like a good base of leading up to what actually happened and where we are now. So Carrie starts and she says that a battle is unfolding between the Pentagon and AI defense contractor Anthropic, which is best known for its Claude large language model coding. And I know Descent in Bloom actually talked to me earlier. She sent me a message that she just messed around with Claude today, and it designed like a website for her out of like some research material that looked incredible. And she said it was really, really impressive what it can do. But this week, the Department of War threatened to effectively blacklist the company from all government contracts or force them to comply if they refuse to satisfy the military's desire for a free-for-all on the technology. This free-for-all reportedly entails the ability to mass surveil Americans and unrestricted uses of AI weaponry. Why would they need to mass surveil Americans? So the first part is, in a post in January of this year, Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei declared some uses of AI red lines. He wrote that using AI for domestic mass surveillance and mass propaganda seemed to me like bright red lines and entirely illegitimate. He went on to claim that fully autonomous AI weapons and AI for use in strategic decision-making are a blurrier line to draw because national defense is a legitimate application for them. However, he still expressed the desire for safety guardrails around such weapons. That's like basic precautions. Quote, "My main fear is having too small a number of fingers on the button such that one or a handful of people could essentially operate a drone army without needing other humans to cooperate to carry out their orders," he wrote. In that post, he expressed concerns that AI tools could compromise democracy and allow people in power to behave as totalitarians. Yes. He also expressed concerns regarding what existing autocratic governments may do with these tools right now. These concerns are reportedly driving the standoff between the Department of War and Anthropic. It's worth noting that based on available reporting, much of this story relies on statements from anonymous Pentagon officials, making it difficult to truly ascertain what's happening behind closed doors. That said, Pentagon officials have reportedly claimed that Anthropic's concerns are unwarranted because the military only wants the technology for lawful activities. Remember what ICE was considering lawful recently. There's also allegedly no need to worry about illegal surveillance, unjust or illegal use of weapons, or anything else. But of course, even a cursory review of U.S. history or current events shows the U.S. government cannot be trusted to follow the Constitution and other laws. In retaliation for Anthropic's resistance, the Pentagon may deem the company a supply chain risk, which would effectively blacklist them from government contracting entirely, not just with military, but any division of the government. On Thursday, the Pentagon reportedly took its first step in this process. Secretary of War Drunken Whiskey Pete Hegseth also reportedly signaled that he could use the 1950s-era Defense Production Act to force the company's hand and give the military free rein over its tools anyway. I'm going to commandeer your company and militarize it, and then force you guys to do what I want. So Carrie says this is too little too late. While I, like Amodei, oppose using AI or any technology for mass surveillance and warfare, his opposition reads somewhat disingenuous or hollow. As this standoff has been unfolding, Anthropic announced a loosening of safety restrictions on their products. Okay. The company had previously pledged that it would not develop AI tech beyond the point where it could guarantee such tools could be used safely. However, facing the possibility of falling behind other players in the AI race, they altered their own guardrails. Further, despite Amodi's concerns about mass surveillance, he apparently had no problem partnering with none other than Palantir, along with Amazon Web Services, every snitch bot on the fucking planet, to deliver Claude to the U.S. military. Claude was the first LLM to receive clearance for classified use. So again, not exactly our friend. Palantir has denied any role in helping the U.S. government conduct domestic surveillance, except in the whole ICE app. What? How? They run the operating system for ICE that is literally conducting surveillance on all Americans. That will scan someone's face and tell you all about them. And they're literally saying that this software is more important to ICE agents than your passport. That's Palantir software, so that's bullshit. Of course, however, previous reports spanning last year all the way back to whistleblower Edward Snowden's 2013 releases suggest that Palantir has no issue helping facilitate government spy operations, whether they target Americans or others. Because as we know from Whitney Webb, Palantir spawned out of DARPA. In light of all this, Amodi's and Anthropic's resistance to the worst uses of AI in government are arguably too little too late. He may justify Anthropic's partnership with the military by citing national defense and protecting democracy, but the nature of government and power is to expand and encroach. Whatever misgivings Amodi may have about red lines and the conflict between his company and the Pentagon reflects this reality. Case in point, the current flare-up of tensions between Anthropic and the Pentagon reportedly arose, again, when the company discovered that Anthropic tools were used in Trump's regime change operation in Venezuela. Now, Anthropic has denied harboring concerns about this, but they came from somewhere. Regardless, the company clearly doesn't get to pick and choose how the military applies their technology. That evidently and unsurprisingly went out the window when they signed up for military industrial funding. And predictably, the military is demanding unfettered access regardless of whether or not Amodi and others at his company consent. It's almost like digital rape, it feels like. Unfortunately, the history of the tech industry is steeped in collaboration with and dependence on the military. The Cold War saw the burgeoning technology industry profit and thrive off the U.S. government's penchant for war, militarism, and eventually surveillance, a relationship that continues to this day. It's a staggering feat for engineers to find work in Silicon Valley that doesn't eventually provide technology to the U.S. government in some way, shape, form. Indeed, Elon Musk's XAI is happy to take Anthropic's place, as is OpenAI's ChatGPT. I'm going to bring an article about that. This week, XAI agreed to provide its Grok services for classified sectors of the government. I can't possibly see anything happening there that could be negative. The Pentagon has moved forward with this arrangement despite Grok's subpar security, reflecting Whiskey Pete's growing track record of flouting safety precautions, like the Signal chat. Predictably, those in positions of power believe everyone else must bend to their demands based on the construct of authority. Respect my authority. Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering Emil Michael, even argued that Anthropic's resistance to providing unmitigated AI access for the Pentagon was not democratic. They literally wanted to give them the Huawei treatment, and I believe they did. On Friday, Amodi said that the Pentagon's threats will not change his position, and then that undersecretary called him a liar with a God complex. This is comically hypocritical considering the Pentagon's long track record of dishonesty and authoritarianism. Whether it remains clear what either party will do, it's doubtful that Anthropic will be able to successfully bite the violent hand that feeds them. And I agree with Carrie's assessment there, that either they're going to, and they may just get the death penalty out of it by the government because they're going to cut off their funding. So I go to this site called Tech Republic, which then reports the other day, in a further development, like I said, OpenAI secured a Pentagon deal to deploy AI on classified systems as the U.S. government bars Anthropic over national security concerns. So they did implement this national security thing. In Washington's new AI battlefield, one company got a contract and another one got cut off. But it was really interesting to see what happened. In a dramatic pivot in the U.S. government's embrace of AI, OpenAI has sealed a new agreement with the Pentagon to deploy its AI models on the DoD, no, it's the Department of War, classified networks under specific safety guardrails, just hours after the administration moved to bar rival Anthropic from federal use. And we just talked about why, but Trump directed all federal agencies to stop using Anthropic's technology, citing national security concerns after months of tense negotiations over military access and ethical safeguards. A standoff that ultimately left Anthropic on the outside while OpenAI secured its position as a key defense partner. All right. OpenAI steps into the defense spotlight. And again, you know, what's his name? Sam Altman. He definitely was hurting for money, and we know that he was going to look to have to do another round of funding. So now this gives him yet another lifeline and another outlet of funding and another new opportunity. Under the new arrangement, OpenAI will provide its advanced AI models for use again on the Pentagon's classified systems, allowing defense teams to build secure applications for logistics, intelligence analysis, cybersecurity, and operational planning. So they're building Skynet. What could possibly go wrong? Unlike the breakdown with Anthropic, OpenAI was happy to agree to a framework that permits lawful use while maintaining defined safety guardrails and usage policies. Sure. Two of our most important safety principles are prohibitions on domestic mass surveillance. We read this whole thing, and the human responsibility for the use of force, including for autonomous weapon systems. The Department of War agreed with these principles, reflects them in law and policy, and we put them into our agreement. So basically, the government agreed to what Anthropic wanted, put it in writing for OpenAI, but wouldn't put it in writing for Anthropic. We will also build technical safeguards to ensure our models behave as they should, which the Department of War also wanted. Sure, they did. Now, they want it so that they can figure out how to get around it and then debug that so that everybody else then has it. Come on, guys. The deal builds on OpenAI's earlier $200 million Department of War contract awarded last year alongside Anthropic, xAI, and Google. Now Anthropic is on the way out. While Anthropic ultimately resisted expanded access tied to domestic surveillance and autonomous weapons concerns, OpenAI negotiated terms that satisfied federal requirements without publicly breaking from its stated safety principles. How did that happen? With Anthropic sidelined, OpenAI now stands as one of the primary AI providers embedded within U.S. defense infrastructure, a shift that could now reshape how frontier AI models are integrated into national security operations. Now, here's what's interesting. And again, this then recounts exactly what happened. Trump had said on Truth Social that Anthropic had made a disastrous mistake trying to strong-arm the Department of War. They didn't. They literally were asking for the same clause that the Department of War was happy to give to OpenAI. I think they just didn't want Claude to have it because Claude is smarter than OpenAI, who just went along with this thing. Confirming Trump's announcement, Hegseth also designated Anthropic a supply chain risk to national security via a post on Twitter. This is how news breaks now. These idiots post on Twitter. Hegseth added that, quote, Anthropic will continue to provide the Department of War its services for a period of no more than 6 months to allow for a seamless transition to a better and more patriotic service. Oh, blow me, you drunken fuck. Anthropic condemned its designation as a supply chain risk to national security. Of course they did. According to a response publication it made on February 27th, they called the designation legally unsound, and they should sue. The company, through the publication, also noted that they would challenge the designation in court. That's fine. I mean, I don't know if that's going to necessarily get them the contracts or the stuff, the money, but certainly would clear their name as not being a security risk. Now, I'm not even done there, only because I like this guy, Michael Spencer. You may not follow Michael Spencer. Michael Spencer and I have been connected on Substack since the introduction of Notes back in April of 2023. That's almost 3 years now. I have tremendous respect for Michael. Michael has jumped into everything AI and has been doing it every day for 3 years, and as long as I've known of him. He publishes a multitude of AI-related newsletters and reads up on everything within the industry. So I was very keen to learn what his take on this entire situation was, and I was glad when he decided to put a public note out about it. And he said that AI must stand for peace, not war. I've just canceled my usage and personal OpenAI accounts. The Anthropic OpenAI Department of War story rings like an AI risk. Think about it. There is no version of the future where surveillance enabled by AI doesn't lead to dystopia. And the facts of this story should tell you everything about who's willing to stand up to that future or stand behind it. So before this week, Anthropic held the Pentagon's only classified AI contract worth up to $200 million. They wanted 2 restrictions written into the deal: no mass domestic surveillance of Americans and no fully autonomous weapons without human oversight. Subsequently, the Pentagon demanded unrestricted access for quote unquote all lawful purposes, and Anthropic wouldn't budge. So the administration labeled them a national security supply chain risk, which is a designation previously reserved for companies tied to foreign adversaries. And President Trump ordered every federal agency to stop using their products. Hours later, OpenAI announced that it had secured its own Pentagon deal. But here's the rub. Sam Altman has said publicly that OpenAI shares the same 2 red lines as Anthropic and that the Pentagon agreed to honor them. The difference is that OpenAI accepted the all lawful purposes framing, essentially trusting that existing law already prevents the worst outcomes, while Anthropic's position was that the law hasn't caught up with AI yet, and that these models can supercharge surveillance in ways that current statutes simply don't cover. I know people will read this through several different lenses, and I respect that. But if you're building, investing in, or depending on AI companies, the ethical substance and moral compass of the providers has to matter. I should say, I don't fully vibe with Anthropic either. The company downloaded millions of pirated books to train its AI models, was found liable for copyright infringement, and settled for $1.5 billion, which was the largest copyright recovery in history, affecting around 500,000 authors. But when it came to the thing that actually matters most, whether AI should be used to surveil citizens and kill people without human oversight, only one company was willing to lose a $200 million contract over it. Worth thinking about before you renew. All of this is also used as marketing and branding while governments and sovereigns aren't taking AI regulations seriously. He says, if you are an American or Chinese model, you are essentially doing, if you use an American or Chinese model, you're doing so at your own risk if you're a smaller country. As consumers, we have to vote with our usage and our wallets. Man, is that something that we've been talking about for years? That our wallets and where we put our dollars is the only thing these guys really understand in time. BDS. I cannot trust Silicon Valley, Wall Street, or the Pentagon will do the right thing. Rule of law has deteriorated to the point where AI supremacy will become a risk, not a boon to civilization. All right. And again, this is Michael Spencer, and his main newsletter is called AI Supremacy, which is kind of interesting. Obsessed with future topics like AI, robotics, quantum computing, startups, investing, self-made, no PhD, with strong opinions. But he's a sponge. He absorbs a ton of material. Again, tremendous respect for Michael. And he canceled his OpenAI over it. But remember that he also reminds people that Claude Code and Anthropic was no innocent. They still held that classified contract until this week. And we're happy to hold that classified contract. And I've got one more take on this that I want to bring, and that is from a friend of the show, 7Cs, who also has been following all of this. And he says people will pretend that Anthropic is a good guy because they promise not to spy on you or kill you the exact same way that Google used to say, don't be evil, while their founders were in bed with Epstein and DARPA and the CIA, or Musk buying Twitter would create free speech. All right. And yeah, Corbett apparently addressed that in his latest show as well. But that none of these, first of all, they're all funded by the government and by the military, right? And you can't trust any of them. And that's the whole point here. But I just found it fascinating to see kind of how this all played out. And that I also read a thing that consumer installs, personal installs of Claude in the last week have been up like 30 or 35%, whereas OpenAI installs and usage has been down about 20%. So the market reacted and said, we support what Anthropic is doing here, and we seem to be opposed to what OpenAI did in jumping in. And that could just be an anomaly. I don't know. And that's one of the reasons I didn't bring this. Yeah, don't forget the DARPA dogs. No, I won't forget the DARPA dogs at all. Yeah, it's wild how quickly that entire sector has moved. Yeah, the Anthropic deal is fishy. I agree. And they're still going to be in government systems for 6 months. That's going to allow them to try to either backtrack or make some other kind of deal, in my mind. They're not going to sit on the sidelines and watch all their competitors scoop up all these contracts while they get nothing. Karen Peterson, Pentagon Directive 3000.09 does say fully autonomous, no human in the middle. Right. So OpenAI just basically agreed to it without really reading the fine print. Anthropic won't be personally liable. Again, the do no harm, but they're going to be doing harm in plenty other places, you can be sure. All right, so support independent media because we need it more than ever. We're doing real well on time, fam. All right, the ways to do that: Cash App, $, Indie News Network, co-fi.com/Indie News Network, over at paypal.me/Indie News Network as friends and family. Monthly, you can subscribe at patreon.com/Indie News Network and support the network. IndieNewsNow.com is the name of the show. It's also a website that aggregates news from over 100 different outlets, 24/7, completely ad-free, and you can tip the network over there. And then we've got our Substacks. We're live over at IndieMediaToday.com. Greetings to Richard Sager, who just joined over there over at Substack at Indie Media Today. And we also have INNNewsletter.com that I publish every Friday, a newsletter summarizing all the different clips and live streams and articles from the week for the entire Indie News Network that I am a co-founder of and a member of. All right, I have got two other stories, definitely one other story, and we're going to get into it's the longest story, which is what happened over in Iran. And that was this week with our unprovoked attack on another sovereign nation. This seems to be happening way too often. And I wanted to start by bringing a video. I think somebody mentioned earlier when we talked about the Julian Assange archive being in Germany that Netanyahu had fled to Germany, or to Berlin, when the shooting started.
Netanyahu has officially fled to Germany. I mean, Germany, of all places. The jokes write themselves. The official Israeli state aircraft landed in Berlin, Germany at 8:30 p.m. today after circling Israel for hours looking for a safe place to land. This flight is often used for the continuity of government during crises, by the way. Consider this jet the Israeli Air Force One. Netanyahu was literally fleeing Israel amidst retaliatory attacks from Iran. He could not handle it. The plane was stuck circling over Israeli coastal airspace for several hours before finally leaving Israeli airspace to try to seek refuge in Europe. The jet was seen circling over Greece, and it is alleged that they were refused entry in Cyprus. While the West is sending their children to die in a war that they have absolutely no involvement in, the leader of Israel has fled the country. And to Germany, no less. How about that?
I love that. That's really funny. But she also points out, can someone in Europe finally arrest this man like international law requires of you? I also wanted to point out that it likely wasn't Netanyahu himself that made the decision to get in his Air Force One because of the whole continuity of government thing. My guess would be that his security team decided that since there may be the chance that rockets may be hitting where he is, and they would like to keep their president alive, they would have picked him up and put him on a plane, whether he wanted to go or not. Not that he's not a cowardly motherfucker that would have been happy to get on the plane, but I'm just guessing that his security team would have had something to say about that. So first thing is that Bibi ran away. And remember that the last time the rockets came, that Bibi ran away, and they acted like, oh no, he just went to a meeting in Cyprus. That's just misinformation. No, when they attack Iran, he leaves the country. That's protocol, clearly. I brought another one here. All right, I love this video. Let me go back and start this over. All right, this is from Will Z Talks, who I've never heard of, but all of a sudden this guy's blowing up out of nowhere. Let me start this over. He starts by watching this video, but this woman says, I never thought I'd see the sky like this in Dubai.
I'm in JVC right now, and I can see it's not meant to be happening here.
Here. It's not meant to be happening here. Those are the words uttered by hundreds of white people that never thought the violence of the regimes they were supporting would be facing them face to face. She then goes on to universalize, but she clearly doesn't believe it. Oh, I don't believe anyone should be hurt, but I'm really concerned that I'm considering being hurt. And I shouldn't have to handhold very far to point out how callous and privileged and disgusting this is, but it is an interesting admission of all of those things, because it admits how the understanding that we are safe as privileged white people comes with the tacit understanding that other people are not. But that is denied from our understanding. It is rejected from our collective consciousness by the idea that discussing it is political. You can live in the UAE, you can support it, you can visit it and fund it. And it's political or not acceptable to discuss how they are getting their hands dirty in Congo or Sudan by committing genocide. But the second that it affects you, suddenly you are very, very aware of how here is different than there. And as the American empire and its proxies in the United Arab Emirates and Israel fall, we are seeing that difference split. We are seeing the privilege of being within the empire, the privilege of not being subject to the American empire's violence, slowly break away. And it won't happen all the time, and I don't think it'll singularly be from Iran, but that privilege is breaking. And as we see it break, the admission of that privilege is becoming clearer. To recognize that you are safe in the empire is to recognize that everyone else is unsafe because of the empire. So if you suddenly realize that the violence of this extremist genocidal empire is harmful, the most effective way you can undermine it is by dismantling that genocidal empire and its violence, not just bemoaning when the natural and entirely inevitable effect of its extreme aggression happens, retribution.
That kid's sharp. Give him a follow. Will Z Talks. Jesse Eisenberg. He reminds me, he sounds like Jesse Eisenberg, like the Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network. It's very much that kind of cadence, honestly. But Truth Free says, what we allow on others will come back to us every single time. But it's also not even what we allow on others. It's what our government is doing overseas to others. They will eventually turn around and do to us. All right. So on top of that, I've got one more.
Yahoo
this is another Damo knows. Some people know this guy.
Benjamin Netanyahu is still flying around the world under an ICC arrest warrant, and that's precisely why his problem has just got much bigger, because every journey now needs a record, every overflight exposes a choice, and every silent accommodation tightens the knot he's stuck in. This isn't about one trip or one route. It's about a system that's stopped working quietly and is now failing openly and in public. European states are waving him through their airspace while pretending international law still means something. The court is watching its own authority drain away, and the contrast couldn't be uglier. The man accused of orchestrating mass civilian harm travels freely, while by comparison the UN rapporteur documenting those crimes can't even use a credit card or access basic banking because of financial restrictions they've had slapped on them for investigating an ally. That's not a malfunction. That's how the system is choosing to operate now. Once that choice is put on display, people don't miss it. It doesn't quietly go away either. Right, so a sitting Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is travelling internationally under an active International Criminal Court arrest warrant yet again, adjusting his flight paths, threading European airspace, avoiding some jurisdictions, relying on others for passage, and doing it all in full view because we can all access the flight path. It's all public information. Yet at the same time, the United Nations Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese, who's been documenting the crimes that underpin that arrest warrant, has been financially cut off without charge, process or explanation. Right, so Benjamin Netanyahu is still flying around the world under an ICC.
So I brought that one, obviously, because of the Francesca Albanese portion. We've talked about a lot about the sanctions that have been put on individuals, both Albanese, on Jacques Baud over his reporting and his opinions on Ukraine, but also we talked about Hussein Dogru from Redstream being persecuted in Germany, which is even more egregious considering that's where they allowed Netanyahu to fly to. Unbelievable. Next, I wanted to also point out that the Democrats, of course, because we have a uniparty that's all subject to Israel's wishes, and this was all done because of Israel, and there seems to be no pretense about why we're doing this. Hegseth basically said that it was at Israel's insistence, and Trump is basically saying there is really no justification for it other than Israel saying so. We knew that Miriam Adelson was demanding this, all right? Sanaa Saeed, who used to be with Al Jazeera Plus, and now she's off on her own. She's on Substack under Views My Own, sanaasaeed.substack.com. He says, if you're going to bomb and destabilize a nation, please use the correct paperwork and procedures, is what a lot of these Democrats are saying right now. And of course, we know that what really makes the Democrats mad isn't the fact that Trump invaded, it's that he didn't ask their permission first. Because if you look at what Democratic leader Jeffrey said, Iran is a very bad actor and must aggressively be confronted for its human rights violations, nuclear ambitions, support of terrorism, and the threat it poses to our allies like Israel and Jordan in the region. Wait a minute. What about the United States' human rights violations, like in ICE detention facilities right now? Our nuclear ambitions. What makes it that we're allowed to have nuclear weapons and they're not? What about our support of terrorism because a motherfucker that used to be the head of ISIS or Al-Qaeda is now the head of Syria and we're calling him President Jelani? And then, of course, the threat that we pose to everybody else's allies and regional stability outside of Israel and Jordan. Okay? Fuck this guy. Okay? He's just mad again that Donald Trump failed to seek congressional authorization. He'd have said yes. They'd have said yes. But Trump didn't want to have the possibility of saying no. So he just went ahead and did it anyway. They're cheering this on. They're happy that he's doing this because this saves them from having to vote on it in the first place. This is fucking garbage because Hakeem Jeffries is fucking garbage, as is the Democratic Party, as is the Republican Party, as is the entire United States government, which is completely subservient to Israel. And fuck Israel. I also wanted to point out that the U.S. is now unequivocally employing and endorsing first strike as a policy against nations that did not attack us. Syria did not attack the United States. Lebanon did not attack the United States or Israel for that matter. First, Venezuela did not attack us, yet we took their leader, kidnapped him, and put another one in charge. We're doing that in Cuba right now in the form of blockade. We've now done it in Iran, and of course we bombed Somalia like 40 times this year and nobody's even known about it, but Dave DeCamp over at Anti-War reports on it every other day. During the current actions, 0 of these 6 sovereign countries attacked the U.S. or Israel first. This, in my opinion, opens the U.S. to be potentially hit by retaliatory strikes. Wouldn't it make sense that they would want to get revenge? So somebody points out at Slightly Lucid, what's super fucked up is that if any of these nations dared to defend themselves, the government and media here would endlessly bleat the phrase unprovoked attack. They've already been doing it about Iran. I said right now they've been provoking the Venezuela narrative by deporting and imprisoning, or AKA detaining, thousands of Venezuelans for a year. They've been provoking the Somali narrative by targeting about 100,000 people in the United States, more than half of whom are U.S. citizens, to justify eventually regime changing that country and installing one that will accept Palestinians from Israel as they clear out Gaza as that's rebuilt. We are also simultaneously provoking the Cuban narrative with the Gaza-like treatment of not allowing any supplies in. And by the way, Netanyahu completely cut Gaza off again from all supplies and all trucks. We've been provoking the people of Lebanon and Syria, who plenty of people that lived through that lived peaceful lives in their countries now have lost families, livelihoods, neighborhoods, and more. That's going to radicalize somebody from one of those places. That could also be seen as motivation for seeking to punish the U.S. and Israel. Now let's add Iran to that group. I forgot completely about Nigeria. I forgot we bombed Nigeria too. Let's not also forget that Trump's willingness to ignore sanctions and deal with Russia. All right. Or whose willingness? No, it wasn't Trump. Spitting in the U.S. face. Oh, Imran Khan. Right. Imran Khan didn't, spit in the U.S. sanctions face and tried to deal with Russia. That got him cooed, and he's still in prison, kind of like Maduro in a way. They just get rid of the leaders that are inconvenient to them, that challenge them, and they wait them out. Petro's next. U.S. imperialism just once again pulled the mask off fully for anyone willing to look, and they're setting up narratives which will then be used to justify further escalation in each case. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Haiti too. All of these places, one resident one nationalist from any one of these places commits a false flag because of they're pissed at what the United States is doing to their home country here in the U.S., that sets up a lot of justification to do XYZ. And like I said, they're already planting that seed for Venezuela, for Pakistan, for Cuba, for Somalia. I mean, Lebanon, Syria, you name it. They'll have somebody that could potentially commit some kind of an act that could justify further escalation in their country. But you got to pay attention to how they're setting up these narratives in order to be able to call it out and see it for what it is when it happens in real time. I also wanted to point out another tweet that I wrote. Richard Medhurst, who did his first live stream in months and months and months this week, go check that out. And he's been putting clips out. He said the real question isn't why Iran are hitting all these foreign bases in the region, but why the bases were there in the first place. And that's a great question. But I took it even further and a whole different angle, which was my real question is, why isn't anyone responding in kind by targeting U.S. command structure the way that the U.S. has targeted command structure in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, and now in Iran? I said, I see people posting coordinates for some place in Florida called Mara something. Since political assassination and sovereign decapitation is now policy here, what's stopping anyone else from using it? Just saying, not saying, just saying. Just asking a question here. Not making a suggestion, not making an implication. I'm just asking questions. Finally, but it's not really finally because I have a couple other things here. I don't know why I'm missing them. I'm not. Good. Scented Bloom still hopefully in chat. If not, I hope she had a good night and we'll see her soon. Overnight, the U.S. dropped a bomb on the Shajare Tayyebe Girls Elementary School in Iran, killing dozens of students and teachers, more than 150 overall. In Iran, now some people ask, it was on Saturday. Why would that have been on a Saturday in the middle of the night? Well, in Iran, the work and school week runs from Saturday through Wednesday, and because their time zone is 8.5 hours ahead of U.S. East, a strike launched late at night in America occurs right in the middle of the Iranian morning school day. All right, and somebody points out that Israel's favorite pastime, sadly, is killing children. Not allegedly, that's what they do. I also wanted to bring this horrifying picture that Eva Bartlett posted. Go follow Indie Media Award honoree Eva Bartlett over at Reality Theories, t.me/reality theories. And she's pointing out the similarity of the mass grave for civilians executed by the Israeli army at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza, including women and children, and below are the 165 killed by Israeli forces, the bombs in Iran this week. Israel produces mass graves. That's what you can say. I also wanted to bring another thing from Sanaa Saeed. This is a video of the funeral procession for the 168 killed in the airstrike on that school in Minab. What an incredible scene. What a show of defiance against the U.S.-Israeli war on their country to show out in the hundreds of thousands for those little children. Look at that sea of people. It did not have to happen. Fuck Israel for all of that. Oh, man. To see some of these parents mourning and grieving and picking at the rubble and the bloody backpacks and looking through the school books and this is what Israel does. They want to create parents that either have to care for amputated children with amputated limbs, which is one of the reasons why they've created the largest group of child amputees in the world in Gaza. Or they want like mourning parents who are not thinking clearly about what's happening in their country and about what to do with this Israeli invasion. It's disgraceful. It's disgusting. It's a war crime every single time. Every single one involved should be put in prison or get the wall, honestly. Like, this is death penalty worthy because they're then causing Americans to be less safe worldwide. And Truth Freeze pointed out that Americans were being told to leave Middle Eastern countries, but there's no way to get them out. And that the embassies aren't really helping to get them out. Trump is cutting all ties with Spain, Ghost Art, or is Spain cutting all ties with the United States? I think he's doing them a favor. Jasmine Crockett got obliterated in her primary. Of course she did, because the other guy has Adelson funding. That's Tallarico. But again, they all play for Israel. It doesn't matter. And Crockett was going to be happy to play for Israel. Maybe not AIPAC. She took J Street money, and she was on board with everything that that AIPAC was basically doing and not opposing what they were doing. So, again, Crockett was a long shot. She's a barking seal as far as I'm concerned. And she'll continue to, I'm guessing she's going to stay in Congress, or they'll send her over to MSNBC or CNN for a year or two, and then she'll run for Congress again. And she'll likely win on name recognition alone, because that's what these people do. Okay. Should I do the Zorro Ranch story, or do you want to just get to the GoFundMe's and get out of here a few minutes ahead of time? Because Zorro Ranch story is great, but it's a little long. There is a lot in there, and it's kind of, it's Epstein stuff. So let me know what you think. I'm down to do either one, but I'm just curious to hear what people are thinking out there. If you want to hear me read this article about what's going on at Zorro Ranch. And it was written about 2 weeks ago by Descent in Bloom. I'll show you it here. I showed it during last week's show when I read the other story about Great St. James. And it just got so late because we were reading the article. We read the article from the U.S. citizen that gave his account of what had happened from the time that he was taken into custody until he was released, that we didn't get to this. But I'll go through this because, again, I think that there is quite a bit that people may have missed. I also haven't gone through all of it, so I'd like to see it for myself. But the sentence starts by saying, New Mexico wants answers about Zorro Ranch, but here's what they'll find. She went through the flight logs, phone records, victim journals, which expose how Epstein built a human trafficking operation on 10,000 acres of New Mexico desert. So she starts by telling this story. She's great at painting visuals like this. The year is 1993. Jeffrey Epstein writes a check for $12.5 million, and Bruce King, former governor of New Mexico, hands over the keys to Zorro Ranch. What changed hands isn't just real estate, but 10,000 acres. That is 15 square miles of isolation, along with 6 underground floors. It's located 30 miles from Santa Fe, 50 miles from Los Alamos National Laboratory, and 20 miles from the Santa Fe Institute, and yet much further than that from anyone paying attention. Epstein launched his human trafficking operation here, sustaining it through connections with powerful figures. And yet, the FBI has never conducted a formal investigation of this place. Not even when they were given a tip about buried bodies on the property. In fact, the federal government actively prevented the state of New Mexico from investigating claiming it could jeopardize an ongoing federal investigation and compromise potential charges. Yes, that's former Attorney General Bill Barr. Could it be because Bill Barr, the head of the DOJ at the time, was implicated in the files as being a witness to the abuse? Maybe. This wouldn't be the first time that someone in high places protected Epstein. Lest we forget that Alex Acosta is the reason that Epstein was able to get away with this for so long. Acosta was the prosecutor responsible for a 2008 deal that let Epstein avoid a potential life sentence in exchange for a short stint in a county jail. That same Alex Acosta, who later became the labor secretary during the administration of Trump in the first time, told officials during his transition interviews for the Trump admin that he point-blank told them to leave the Epstein stuff alone because, quote, he belonged to intelligence, both national and foreign, and was, quote, above his pay grade. As of today, 6 years and 6 months and 11 days have passed since Jeffrey Epstein died, and it was only after the latest Epstein file surfaced this year did pressure build enough for the New Mexico Attorney General's office to act again. In that time, this ranch has changed hands, now owned by the family of MAGA Republican Don Huffines, who was running for Congress. His team says construction of a Christian retreat has begun, bringing excavation, demolition, and the destruction of whatever was left behind. And yes, this is more significant than some people may realize. The ranch was the epicenter of Epstein's operations, far more than people realize. Little St. James was the headline, but this was the foundation. The island became the thing people argue over. The ranch, where the architecture of it all took shape, stayed in the shadows for the most part, until now, for good reason. She spent the last few weeks investigating every available source she could find. Flight logs, the Epstein files, court records, and victims' testimony, and this is what she was able to put together. Here's the significance of Zorro Ranch. On the map, Zorro Ranch was not in the middle of nowhere. It was in the middle of a very specific somewhere. Santa Fe's political class, Los Alamos' national security and nuclear weapon network, and the Santa Fe Institute's world of complex systems research that treats networks, evolution, and information as things that you can model and manipulate. The Santa Fe Institute is a scientific think tank built by scientists from Los Alamos, the lab that created the atomic bomb. In 1984, George Cowan and Nobel Prize winner Murray Gell-Mann founded it as a boundary-breaking research center. By the early 1990s, Jeffrey Epstein had donated at least $275,000 after Ghislaine Maxwell introduced him to Gell-Mann, a connection that ran through her father's foundation that had already funded a $300,000 professorship there. That's weird. Epstein placed his ranch just 23 miles from the Institute and 50 miles from Los Alamos, a location he later admitted was intentional. Gell-Mann even personally thanked Epstein for financial support in his 1994 book, The Quark and the Jaguar. All right, so here's Zorro Ranch down at the bottom of the map. All right, there's the Santa Fe Institute. There in this blue dot over here is the Los Alamos Lab and National Security Science Center. Right? Close enough to brush shoulders with those he wanted to influence and far enough to operate without any other witnesses. But there's a reason beyond proximity to power that kept Epstein interested in the sciences, and that's exactly what his plan was for the ranch. And again, Whitney Webb documented a lot of this stuff years ago as well. This is not like the first time this has ever been uncovered, but look, the center's researching this stuff because She's just learning about all this stuff for the first time, so it's new to her. The flight logs and call records for New Mexico make clear that human trafficking was taking place there. People were flown into the remote ranch and didn't always leave on the same plane. Names like Nadia and labels such as Female 1 appear on arrival records, but the handlers' records show they departed without them. That kind of separation is consistent with how trafficking operations move people. Research shows that traffickers isolate victims by moving them to new locations where they're alone and dependent on the trafficker, a form of psychological manipulation and a control tactic that matches the pattern of people being dropped off at the isolated ranch. During the busiest years, as passengers were repeatedly listed as Female 1 or Male 1 with no real names attached. That's a little weird. The anonymity was built into the official logs. And I guess they were able to do that because they were taking private planes because they had the Lolita Express. The compound itself was built for control. Between 94 and 1999, Epstein transformed the property into a 33,339 square foot hacienda-style mansion with its own 4,400-foot private airstrip, a hangar, a helipad, surveillance cameras at every gate, and hidden cameras installed in Kleenex boxes purchased from a spy shop. And again, she's got the receipts to link to this from The Independent. Beneath the main residence sat a confirmed underground floor of roughly 8,000 square feet, containing massage rooms, jacuzzi rooms, and mechanical rooms that housed the surveillance network's servers and recording equipment, all underground. Think about the kind of money it took to build a compound like this. Justice Department emails from 2017 reference image files suggesting up to 6 underground levels accessed by a subcellar elevator. A reverse osmosis water system permitted to discharge over 10,000 gallons per day serviced the compound. What did they need to produce 10,000 gallons of water a day for? This is infrastructure that researchers have questioned whether the surface buildings alone could justify. This wasn't a home, it was an operation. Victim accounts match the flight data. Annie Farmer was flown to the ranch at 16 in 1996 and later said that she was sexually abused there. Virginia Giuffre formerly reports, she's now deceased. She formerly reports on 2 recorded flight logs leaving Santa Fe with known Epstein associates aligning with her testimony regarding the ranch. There's a couple of pictures of her at the ranch from the Epstein files. The trafficking at Zorro Ranch was not the end goal, but instead it was the mechanism. The end goal was something Epstein talked about openly. The scientists, at dinner parties, at conferences he hosted. He wanted to use the ranch as a human breeding facility. Quote, girls' journals recovered in the files describe Ghislaine Maxwell, who appeared on 37% of all flights to New Mexico, taking their babies. It includes photos of sonograms and heartbreaking pleas to keep their babies. One girl describes being repeatedly impregnated by Epstein, starting at age 16, with babies taken away shortly after birth. She calls herself a quote-unquote human incubator. She talks about how Ghislaine Maxwell was present during at least one birth and would tell her to close her eyes so she wouldn't even see the baby. She documents at least one miscarriage caused by pregnancies too close together, multiple live births where babies were immediately taken, and severe psychological trauma and disassociation. She wrote it in the only way she could, in her journals, in code, with magazine clips. She is gone and she won't be coming back, with an ultrasound photo. There's her clipping out a poem from January 28, 63, from called Child, that says, my heart belonged to her. Think about what it means to be 14 years old. You're in 8th or 9th grade. You still have a curfew. You might have just started wearing makeup. Your biggest worry should be a math test or whether someone likes you back. You are, in every meaningful sense, still a child. One navigating the bewildering early stages of figuring out who you even are. Now imagine a man with a private jet tells you or tells someone in your life that he wants to help with your education, that he's a philanthropist, that he has connections. Maybe your family doesn't have much money. Maybe you've been told that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You're flown to a remote ranch in New Mexico that's thousands of acres of desert, 30 miles from the nearest town. There's a private airstrip. Surveillance cameras everywhere. The only way in or out is through a gate controlled by ranch staff. There's no one to call. There's nowhere to go. The girls who survived this carry it in their bodies and their minds for the rest of their lives. The testimony that they've given in courtrooms, on the record, and some even under their own names, is among the bravest speech any human being can offer. They walked into systems that had failed them at every turn and then said, "This happened to me anyway." Here's more of these magazine clippings posted from the files. He wanted young girls, a teen, blonde beauty. She wanted her childhood back. So here's her analysis of how Zorro Ranch worked as a trafficking hub. At the top were Epstein and Maxwell. Maxwell again appeared on 37% of all flights to New Mexico and was present on nearly every trip through 2001. Beneath her was Emmy Taylor, a British actress who has sued victims, listed as Ghislaine's assistant, who flew to the ranch 33 times. Again, that 33 number, sometimes even without Maxwell. When Maxwell stepped back after 2001, Sarah Kellen moved into her role without any break in operations, handling scheduling and logistics for the next several years. On the ground, a woman named Sabrina Zasko coordinated arrivals. Her subpoenaed phone records show call activity rising every time a flight was inbound, moving between Albuquerque and Santa Fe in a steady, repeated pattern. Ranch manager Bryce Gordon and his wife ran the property day to day. In 2013, Bryce was coordinating appointments directly with Epstein. In February 2007, the FBI interviewed Bryce Gordon and his wife. They told agents that Epstein typically spent several weeks there in summer with his assistant, bodyguard, personal trainer, and sometimes his masseuses, who were flown in via the private airstrip. Then someone called the staff and told them they were no longer allowed to speak with the FBI. The interview was immediately terminated. The flight logs show how it worked. Over 10 years, 105 documented flights moved people in and out of New Mexico in what investigators call passenger laddering, meaning the people who flew in were often not the same people who flew out. The flights followed a tight, repetitive triangle: Teterboro, New Jersey, Van Nuys, California, and Albuquerque and Santa Fe, New Mexico. Teterboro sits just outside New York City, close enough for a quiet drive into Manhattan, yet far enough removed from the bustle of major commercial airports to avoid unwanted attention. Also, Teterboro is an airport notorious for private planes. Over time, Maxwell's role faded, and Epstein's younger girlfriend, Karina Shuliak, born in 1989, stepped into her place. And we talked about Karina because she was one of the people that was left the islands and benefited when they were sold. Before the ranch, Epstein had already been grooming her future by paying her tuition, buying her opera tickets, and personally coordinating with the dean of Columbia's dental school to ensure her admission. Karina had emailed him in 2012, 4 years after he was convicted in Florida for prostitution, quote, "You are the purest man of all men." And in another email, she stated, quote, "I love you very much, and you will always have me, no matter what, as long as it makes you happy," unquote. How did she even know him then? I don't know. He listed her as his emergency contact on official medical forms, minimizing the relationship to a simple friend, even as he paid her expenses. Over an 11-month span in 2014, she racked up almost $300,000 on one credit card alone. He spoiled her the way he controlled everyone, with generosity that doubled his leverage. After she finished school, Karina, with a Y, sometimes spelled with an I in the files, moved into an operational role. By 2015, she was ordering large quantities of children's items to Zorro Ranch, shipped directly to 49 Zorro Ranch Road. Again, this is Child's Blue Sensitive Something and 52 other items shipped in 2015, November 2015, to Zorro Ranch Road. Again, sourced from the Department of Justice. In 2016, Epstein was having controlled prescriptions delivered there through the Zorro Management Group. By 2018, Karina was emailing ranch staff about household orders, running the property like it was very much still in use. Because it was. None of this made sense on paper. Epstein hadn't flown to New Mexico since 2006. So it looks like he wasn't there. But he was. And we know this because Bryce Gordon was rescheduling appointments with him back in 2013. The ranch never stopped operating, and Karina was the one keeping it going. 2 days before he died in his cell at Manhattan Correctional Center in New York, Epstein signed her into a trust, again, the 1953 trust, that left her $100 million, all of his loose diamonds, and property rights. He helped her defraud immigration officials and obtain legal status. That's an interesting story right there from the South China Morning Post. That's Epstein and Karina, by the way. Flight logs show that she traveled with Epstein on numerous trips, including his final flight from Paris to New York in August 2019, where FBI agents were waiting on the tarmac to arrest him. She was also the last person to talk to him before he died. Well, Ghislaine, was it worth it? It's worth remembering how he got here. Epstein didn't build this alone. His access to wealth, to elite circles, to the kind of credibility that lets a college dropout sit across from Nobel laureates and former governors, all that came through the Maxwell family. Robert Maxwell, her dad, was one of the most powerful media moguls in Europe before his mysterious death in 1991, where he drowned by falling off his yacht. It was Ghislaine who introduced Epstein to the Santa Fe Institute, to Murray Gell-Mann, to the world of people who could make him look legitimate. She was the bridge between a financial predator and the institutions that gave him cover. She was also his handler. But at the end of the day, Epstein looked out for only one person. He used Ghislaine until she was no longer useful, replaced her with someone younger, and when the walls closed in, he made sure his money went where he wanted it to go. He did what he always did. Ghislaine was sentenced to 20 years in prison, and Karina walked off free. The last sighting of her was in New York City in 2024. Dissent has a message for Ghislaine directly. Ghislaine, I have no pity for you. You knew what was happening. You participated willingly, and you did so for calculated reasons. Your family name gave Epstein access to elite institutions he never could have reached alone, and in exchange for building his credibility and recruiting vulnerable girls, you believed his power would protect you from the disposability you saw coming. But he discarded you the way that you discarded those girls. And while he arranged his own exit, the young women you helped deliver into his hands are still carrying the weight of what you chose to do. This looks like the end of the story, but of course, it isn't. Zorro Ranch wasn't a home. It was a machine built to process human beings. And the people who enabled it walked away richer, freer, and more protected than the children who survived it. Karina Shuliak is still out there, by the way, living quietly on $100 million and a trail of unanswered questions that she's only at the beginning of to pull apart. There is more to this story than could be fit here. The flight patterns, the intelligence connections, the institutions that look the other way on purpose. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And support independent media and support dissentinbloom.substack.com. Killer article, great research. I also saw these flight logs. She sent me a link to the flight logs from New Mexico. I saw Glenn and Eva Dubin's name on there quite a bit. Look up who Eva Dubin is and what they've been up to and how they're connected to this as well. Yes, Robert Maxwell likely is tied to Israeli nukes. Again, he was the super spy. He straddled all of the spy agencies, allegedly. He also was responsible for our textbooks. Amazingly enough, McGraw-Hill was a Maxwell company. And most people in the United States grew up with McGraw-Hill textbooks. Crazy. It's frightening. Again, a lot of frightening stuff tonight. But again, this is all said and done. Now, this operation allegedly may even still be going on for all we know. He may even be at this ranch in one of these underground bunkers for all we know. Zorro Ranch, Los Alamos, New Mexico. That's right. All right. And there's a big mystery. It's still there. And now Don Huffines could unlock the answer, but instead he's building a Christian retreat. That's crazy. Hardlands Media, what's going on, guys? That's Kit Cabello. Good to see you, brother. All right, so that is the story about Zorro Ranch. And we are getting to wrap things up quickly. Before we do, support independent media, because we need it more than ever. Cash App, $, Indie News Network, Ko-fi, PayPal, Patreon, at our website, IndieNewsNow.com, and at IndieMediaToday.com. That's my Substack, over at INNNewsletter.com to support the network. I wanted to finally get to our GoFundMes for the evening that we get to every week. We want to talk about Shanda, and let's see what we can do to help Shanda raise some money. She got home, and she has been home. I have not heard any news recently. You know, it's day to day when it comes to this stuff. I had heard a couple of reports that weren't so great about her possibly even blood or fluids. I don't know where she is and what she's up to right now. All I know is that love her and praying for her and sending positive vibes, and anything anyone can do to help contribute to her GoFundMe. Here, I'm going to drop the link in the chats here. Again, she went through 3 rounds of cancer already in treatment. She had small cell lung cancer. Then it spread. It was in her liver and in her eye. And they did experimental treatment. And right now she's in recovery after going through treatment at home. So I don't know where, what she's up to now. I'm wishing her well, and we love you. Again, Shanda is an Indie Media Award honoree. We're literally born 3 days apart. It's just horrific to know what she's had to go through, and so all the love and support to her and her family. We also wanted to give a shout out to Natalia. I'm waiting to hear from Cowboy Kitty Anthony about what happened with her hearing. It was originally supposed to be last Monday. I still have not heard anything, and he was telling me that he was waiting to hear still. At last check, but if you can drop a note and let us know if there's any update to Natalia's story. She was abducted during a routine traffic stop for a registration check, and she's been in an ICE detention center since last June or July, and she's pending deportation. An appeal was put in. They want to deport her to Ukraine, where she was granted a letter of asylum for fear of her life. So I certainly don't want to see her sent back there, and anything that we can do to help her in her struggle with her GoFundMe would be greatly appreciated. And then finally, we have the story of justice for Aspen. Aspen Martin, you know, we did the Assange archive story earlier. Aspen was one of those people in the streets holding banners, passing out flyers with her mom, Halo Benson, in Oklahoma. Last summer, Aspen went to Tennessee to visit some friends, got in an RV, and went to a festival in Florida. On their way back from Florida to Tennessee, they stopped in Georgia. They were stopped by the police in Georgia. The driver of the RV that she was in was searched, and they found mass quantities of illegal drugs on this driver, or in the RV somewhere, that Aspen was completely unbeknownst to. Everybody in the RV, her and the driver, were arrested and charged with drug trafficking, and she is now facing decades in prison for that charge. And she needs money to raise for lawyers and experts to help petition the court to not implicate and have her arrested and spending decades in prison as well. And the ways to do that again are at linktr.ee and justice, the number 4 Aspen, or we set up a GoFundMe or Halo set up a GoFundMe for her daughter Aspen. It raised the first limit, which was $12,500, but she's going to need a lot more than that. So anything anybody can do, it's been stuck at $12,572 for about 6 weeks now. If there's anyone that can do anything, Descent and Bloom, I read this great article from her about Zorro Ranch. She also wrote a beautiful article about Aspen and about what happened to her in that Georgia prison and about how she got arrested and the fact that she's autistic and the struggle that she's going through with knowing that she could face decades in prison. It's definitely worth the read. So you can go again to linktr.ee/justice and the number 4 Aspen. She's also an artist. If you want to support her, you can buy some of her artwork. All the links. I did a one-on-one interview with her and her mom. We did a fundraiser here on INN. A lot from Aspen's story is very close to home here, and we love Aspen and don't want to see her sent for a crime she didn't commit. So support Aspen in her struggle too. Okay, everyone, we made it. We did all right. I love you all. Tonight was a little rough, I got to admit. And again, we didn't really even talk about anything that's happening in Gaza with the Board of Peace and that nonsense going on. Or, you know, I mentioned that they closed all of the ports and all the entrances back to Gaza again. So they are now, it's total siege and total cutoff of supplies. And that does not bode well for Gaza, of course, as they continue to shrink the area where people are allowed to even exist without being murdered by the IDF. Now they're also going to be starved out once again. They've also, as we reported back in January, have restricted all the aid organizations like Doctors Without Borders. And I saw that Jose Andres said that they have about a week's worth of food left at World Food Kitchen. And then they're going to run out of supplies too. So support Palestinians in the territory directly through their chuffed fundraisers if you can. Eva Bartlett has shared a couple that she's vetted and knows the people personally, where you know that it's going to somebody. And I know a lot of people are hesitant to give to some of these campaigns because they're not really sure if it's going to make it to the right people. But I trust people like Eva to get us to the right people. But yeah, UNRWA is also being blocked and has been designated by Israel as a terrorist organization for aiding Hamas allegedly, which of course they have not, but that's the narrative that Israel needs in order to prevent aid from being able to get into Gaza and to these people. It's disgraceful. It's a war crime. Everybody involved should be in The Hague and in prison themselves. But like I said, I'll be back next Tuesday night. Tomorrow night, watch Reef and Colin on INN News, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 on the West Coast. They're going to have Pasta Jardula as guest, so they're going to ask him a couple of questions. Any questions that you have, you might want to wing over to Reef or Colin, either on Discord or on Twitter or somewhere. If you want to ask Pasta a question, send them over or tag them with it somewhere. Thursday night, I believe I'm going to be doing Nobody Wants to Work Anymore with Himbo. And then Friday, we've got Angel in the afternoon, 7 Eastern. My Thursday night show is 10 Eastern. And then Saturday, I believe Angel's also scheduled to do Pro Wrestling Talk with Miss Witchy Perfect and Alex Knight. That'll be at 8 Eastern on the Ocho, INN 8. That's our second channel. Sunday nights, I do React Show with my buddy Reef, and we do boats smashing into other boats, where we just watch goofy shit for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And we do some funny stuff. And then we'll be back here next Tuesday night to do it all over again, March 10th. So thank you, everyone, for hanging out. Support independent media, because we need it more than ever. And I'll see you next Tuesday. I love you all. And I'll see you soon. No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. I thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
My favorite songs don't hit the same way. I get to the end of a 4-minute track and I'm only looking back thinking, what did they actually say? So
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days, and I still think you're right here away. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe?
you go, set you free, send you home. Wait, please say you know what you need is what you owed, and they won't let you go, set you free, send you home. I was close enough to smell the fire. Jesus took the wheel and then he kicked me off the ride. I was busy shouting at myself from in the crowd, about to throw down and drag myself outside. I had to give myself the business. When I show myself forgiveness, it goes right between the eyes. Was looking past my shoulder, never focused on the prize. I stalked myself through burning sand the better part of 40 nights. I found myself staring in the mirror, yelling, go into the light. Cause I was in the rear view, staring at the highway, horrified. I was in the road ahead, arms wide, ready to be mummified. Gonna be the fella yelling how he's sick of always betting on his life. I'll also be the guy that brought the dice. Half a dozen chambers and I keep an empty 5. Only needed one to break the ice. Only needed one to clear my mind. Only needed one to stop time. Wait, please say you know what you need is what you owed, and they won't let you go, set you free, send you home. I'll be the guy that brought the dice.
People, you don't think I see you crying in your cars, but I do. Sometimes I can feel it at a red light, someone at my side trying to muddle through. See them wiping their eyes in the rear view, like black hole sun in the sky. Why the fuck won't you come when I need you? Well, this moment in time is as close as we'll be and as far as I'll meet you. 2 windows in between us, new moon in the house of Venus. One stranger who sees you and reads your features knows that